full of darkness. Lurking in the shadows, hiding just beyond the veil of reality, are things that go bump in the night. Prepare yourself, because tonight we invite the darkness in. The old Seaview Hotel stood on a windswept cliff, a crumbling monument to forgotten grandeur. They say room 104 was the heart of its darkness. For years, guests reported strange noises, disembodied whispers, furniture moving on its own, and a feeling of being watched. One young couple, the Harringtons, checked in for a weekend getaway, unaware of the room's sinister reputation. The first night, Sarah Harrington awoke to the sound of her name, breathed like a sigh against the window pane. She dismissed it as the wind, but the feeling of dread that sunk into her bones lingered until dawn. The next day, things escalated. John noticed his watch stopped at exactly 3:04 a.m., the same time Sarah had heard the voice. Later that evening, as they were unpacking, a cold spot settled over the bed, so intense it felt like an unseen hand was pressing down on the mattress. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old building sent shivers down their spines. Then, John saw it. A translucent figure, a young woman with long dark hair and eyes filled with a chilling sadness, standing at the foot of the bed. He blinked, and she was gone. Terrified, they tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. By morning, the door was unlocked. They fled, leaving behind their belongings, their sanity hanging by a thread. Cranbrook Mental Asylum. Even its name evokes a sense of unease, a shiver down the spine. Abandoned for decades, it stands shrouded in overgrown vines and whispered rumours. Locals tell of patients who died within its walls, their tormented souls unable to find peace. A group of teenagers, eager to test their bravery, decided to spend the night within Cranbrook's crumbling walls. They were warned, of course. The old caretaker, his eyes clouded with a lifetime of fear, told them to stay away. But youthful arrogance often drowns out the wisdom of age. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and blood orange, they broke in through a boarded-up window. The air inside was thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something cold and oppressive. They explored the decaying rooms, the rusted restraints still bolted to beds, the air thick with the silence of forgotten screams. One of the teenagers, a girl named Jessica, felt a chill as they entered the old hydrotherapy room. The air grew heavy, and she could have sworn she saw a figure move in the shadows. She brushed it off, attributing it to nerves and the power of suggestion. Then the screams started, high-pitched and filled with terror, echoing down the desolate hallways. The teenagers froze, their blood turning to ice in their veins. They followed the sound to a padded cell, its heavy door hanging open. There, huddled in the corner, was their friend Mark. His eyes were wide with terror, his face contorted in a silent scream. He pointed a trembling finger at the corner, his voice a choked whisper. "She's there!" he gasped, the woman in white. Suddenly the temperature plummeted, and a gust of wind slammed the cell door shut, plunging them into darkness. Chapter 3. The Shadow in the Mirror. Mirrors. They reflect our image, but what happens when they reflect something else, something sinister lurking just beyond our perception? This is the story of Amelia, a young woman tormented by a reflection that was not her own. It started subtly. A flicker in the mirror's reflection, a fleeting glimpse of a dark figure standing behind her. She dismissed it as a trick of the light, a figment of her imagination. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One night, as she was getting ready for bed, she caught a full glimpse of it. In the mirror, staring back at her with eyes black as night, was a shadowy figure. It was tall and gaunt, its edges blurring like smoke, and its face was a grotesque mockery of her own. Amelia screamed, dropping her hairbrush to the floor. When she looked back, it was gone. She tried to convince herself it was stress, lack of sleep, anything but what it truly appeared to be. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something was watching her, something evil that existed only within the reflection. As days turned into sleepless nights, the entity in the mirror grew bolder. She would catch it watching her from the corner of her eye, a malevolent grin spreading across its distorted features. Her reflection no longer mimicked her movements. Instead, the figure seemed to move on its own, its eyes never leaving hers. Fear became her constant companion. She avoided mirrors, covering them with sheets, but it didn't matter. She could feel its presence, a constant pressure in her mind, whispering dark thoughts, feeding on her terror. One night, unable to take it anymore, Amelia made a decision. She stood before the largest mirror in her bedroom, the one she had always been inexplicably drawn to, and stared into the eyes of the creature that haunted her reflection. Chapter 4. The Cursed Doll. There's an inherent creepiness to old dolls. Their glassy eyes, their painted-on smiles, their stillness. But some dolls harbour a darkness that goes beyond the unsettling. This is the story of one such doll, a porcelain figure named Eliza, and the trail of misfortune that followed her. It was discovered in the attic of an old Victorian house, its porcelain skin covered in dust, its once vibrant blue eyes now faded and vacant. The woman who found her, Eleanor, was immediately drawn to it, feeling an odd sense of pity for the forgotten toy. She took it home, cleaned it up, and placed it on her bedside table. That night, the nightmares began. Vivid, disturbing dreams of being chased through dark woods by a shadowy figure, the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the darkness. Each morning, Eleanor would wake up drenched in a cold sweat, the feeling of dread clinging to her like a shroud. As the days passed, strange things began to happen around the house. Objects would move on their own, lights would flicker and die, and the distinct feeling of being watched intensified. Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that these occurrences were connected to the doll. One evening, as she sat reading in the living room, she heard a crash from upstairs. Her heart pounding in her chest, she slowly made her way to her bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing a scene that sent chills down her spine. The doll, Eliza, was no longer on the bedside table. Instead, it was lying in the middle of the floor, its vacant eyes staring up at the ceiling, and next to it, scrawled on the hardwood floor in what looked like blood, was a single word: mine. Terror gripped Eleanor's heart. She knew then that the doll was not just a toy, but a conduit for something dark and sinister. Desperate to be free of it, she tried to throw it away, burn it, anything to break its hold on her. But each time it would reappear in her house, back on her bedside table, its cold porcelain stare fixed on her. Driven to the edge, Eleanor sought help from a local priest. Chapter 5. The Phantom Hitchhiker. The lonely stretch of highway that snaked through Blackridge Forest was infamous among locals. They whispered tales of a phantom hitchhiker, a young woman in a white dress who haunted the road, her presence a harbinger of tragedy. One stormy night, a young man named David found himself driving through Black Ridge. He was late, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of work and deadlines. The rain lashed against his windshield, blurring his vision, the wind howling like a banshee in his ears. That's when he saw her. A lone figure standing by the side of the road, her thumb extended in a plea for a ride. She was dressed in a white dress, her long dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. Something about her, a sense of urgency perhaps, compelled David to pull over. He rolled down the window, a gust of wind whipping rain into the car. "Need a lift?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the storm. The young woman nodded silently, her face hidden in the shadows. She got in, her touch icy cold against his skin. She didn't speak, only stared straight ahead, her eyes reflecting the red glow of the taillights. David tried to make conversation to break the unsettling silence, but she didn't respond. He glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, her face still obscured by the shadows. He swore he saw a flicker of movement in the back seat, a fleeting glimpse of something dark and menacing. Suddenly the car swerved violently. David gripped the steering wheel, fighting for control as the car skidded across the slick asphalt. He slammed on the brakes, the car coming to a stop on the shoulder of the road. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins. He turned to the young woman, ready to unleash a torrent of questions, but the back seat was empty. There was no sign of her, no footprints in the mud, nothing. She had vanished as quickly and mysteriously as she had appeared. The darkness is vast, my friends, filled with whispers and shadows. But remember, these are not just stories. So the next time you find yourself alone in the dark, listening to the creaks and groans of your house, remember the tales